I won't be using my name, or revealing exactly where I live, in case this comes back to bite me, but I will say this took place in California. Not so long ago now, I started using this site that catered to pretty much every fetish you can think of, some obviously more popular than others. But if you could think of it, there were probably at least a few people in the community who were interested in it too. I came across a lot of these different groups on the site. S&M, that's a given. Guys who got after girls stuck in fake quicksand. That one I'll never understand. Adults pretending to be babies. Eyeball licking. Vor. Sex with the elderly. Sex with clowns. And, of course, the dreaded furries. The one that really tickled my pickle, though, was leather. I ended up meeting a girl on the site who was into the same thing, and we actually met for coffee. It went well. So well, in fact, that we met up for a few drinks later that week. Her name was Zoe. She looked a little older in real life than in her pictures, but that's usually the case, and she was still very much my type. During the second date, I noticed this table of 4 guys who kept staring over at the two of us. I mentioned this to Zoe, but she didn't seem to think it was a big deal. They looked a little rough around the edges, but I put it to the back of my mind. Anyway, we both ended up getting a little drunk, and she offered for me to go back to her place. Frankly, I was too far gone at that point, and wouldn't have been able to do anything even if I wanted to. So, to her surprise, I actually declined. She seemed aggravated by the fact I said no. I guess she just thought all guys said yes to an invitation like that. In hindsight, she got a bit too angry about the whole thing, but she cooled off pretty quickly, and I selectively forgot about it. The glory of alcohol. In all honesty, I was surprised that this fetish website had led to me sort of dating a girl. I figured it would all be about hookups and one-night flings, but Zoe and I actually organised a third date. I sent her a message about getting dinner, but she messaged me saying we should skip it and get straight to the drinks. Alright, fine by me. The night started well enough. I arrived late, but Zoe looked particularly happy to see me. You smooth dog, I thought to myself. She was wearing a pair of tight leather pants. Very nice, if I do say so myself. I planned on pacing my alcohol consumption better that night, expecting another invitation from Zoe to head back to her place. I didn't plan on whiskey dicking 2 times in a row. I order a beer and drink it slowly. Around 10 minutes in, I spot those same 4 guys from last time over in the corner. I'm sure it was them. This was a completely different bar in a different part of town. Could have just been a coincidence, but I didn't like the way they kept throwing the occasional glance our way, just like the time before. Sometimes you just know something isn't right, and this was one of those times. I mentioned it again to Zoe, and we shared a laugh that those guys must be stalking us or something. We chat and flirt for around an hour, when I start to feel a little lightheaded. That's strange. At this point, I've barely drunk anything. This woozy feeling intensifies little by little, and I start to realize something's wrong. I excuse myself, and by the time I make it to the bathroom, the stalls are spinning. I fumble my way inside one of them, and force myself to vomit in the toilet. I knew what had happened. I'd been drugged. But when, and with what? I managed to call the only person I knew would help me without question, my pal, Jeff. Slurring my words, I tell him the bar name and say I need an evac pronto. I count my lucky stars that I made that call when I did, because a few minutes later, I was so far gone I don't remember a thing. Jeff relayed to me what happened next. When Jeff arrived, I was being carried out of the bar by Zoe and some random guy. Neither appeared concerned. They were more like determined, on a mission. According to Jeff, they led me over to a van where a few other guys were waiting and were preparing to put me in the back of it. When he described the guys to me as best he could, I knew who he was talking about. Those same rough-looking guys who had been staring at Zoe and I the entire evening and the time before. These hadn't been a set of dates, they'd been a set of traps. Zoe and the Glancers were in cahoots. That explains her anger on the second meetup. She must have told those guys where she was going to take me, and was planning on leading me into an ambush. This time she wasn't taking any risks, and wanted to make sure I went along with them. She must have spiked my drink when I went to the bathroom or something. The bitch. Jeff gets out of the vehicle and rushes over. telling them he knows exactly what's going on and that he's going to call the police. He took their license plate number and pictures of the whole group with his phone. A couple of the guys start to get aggressive towards him, and Zoe's there screaming at him to fuck off, but Jeff manages to keep his cool. When a couple of late-night passers-by come along, the group lost their nerve and dumped me in the middle of the road, leaving it to Jeff to scoop me up and get me to a hospital. They took off in the other direction. I woke up in the morning with the worst headache of my life, but other than that, I was going to be fine. I gave the cops as much information as I could about Zoe, but they couldn't find a trace of her on the site, and nothing ever came of it. Knowing Jeff, I'm sure he made it sound more heroic than it really was, but I have to be honest, he really saved my ass that night. I mean, what would have happened to me if he arrived just 1 or 2 minutes later? Jeff thinks human trafficking, but I'm not so sure that happens to guys all too often. I guess it's a possibility. Another friend of mine thinks they wanted to make a snuff movie. In theory, it could have been any number of things, especially when you consider they found me through a fetish website. Personally, I don't like to think too much about it. Guys, I think I fucked up. I could use some advice. It all started when I broke up with my ex 1 year ago. Her name was Haruka. Haruka was really kind, which was why I started dating her in the first place. But she was also really pessimistic, and as such, it was no fun to hang around with her. She was the kind of low spirit that made everyone around her depressed too, including me. You know the type of person I'm talking about. I think she had a borderline personality disorder. I only really noticed her weird traits when we started dating. Every time I'd finish talking on the phone, she'd keep asking me whom I'd been talking to. If ever I didn't respond straight away, she'd ask me over and over again, and wouldn't stop querying me until I answered. Most times I said it was my parents, and it really was. I could see it in her eyes that she didn't really believe me though. During the weekends, it was a given that I would have to spend my time with her. I'm talking every minute of it. When I was away from town due to work, she'd call me up every hour on the hour. She'd also request evidence that I'd actually been at work. Essentially, Haruka was a control freak. She made sure I had no privacy whatsoever. I think she would have controlled the way I shit and piss if she had the chance. She also started saying really disturbing things to me. Things like, "If you ever leave me for another girl, you know that I'd kill you, right?" I realized that this wasn't normal, but I was still in love with her at the time. At one point though, I decided enough was enough. I went to see her parents without telling her to try and sort out her problem, but before I could even discuss it with them, they started saying things like, "Our daughter's been really depressed over the past few years. She's been in such a bad place ever since she was dumped by her last boyfriend. I'm glad she managed to find a good young man like you. She's in a much better place now. I hadn't even seen her laughing until these past few months. Thank you so much." Her mother was seriously in tears before I could bring it up. It was surreal. I ended up saying everything was fine, and left with a newfound enthusiasm to make it work with her. But it didn't last. Her need for control got worse as the days passed by. Towards the end, any conversation with other girls became completely forbidden. When I mentioned I was arranging a work get-together with some female colleagues, she deleted their phone numbers off my phone. Even casual greetings with neighbors was disallowed if they were a female. At restaurants, if the person bringing out the menus was a waitress, Haruka would be the one to order. She wouldn't even let me look in the girl's direction. I couldn't do this anymore. It didn't matter if she had come from a bad place or not. This just wasn't how human beings were meant to live. I think I would have gone mad if I stayed with her any longer. I went to Haruka's apartment early one weekend. Maybe you'll think I'm a freak when I say this, but I actually scripted out how I was going to break the news to her. I made sure the breakup would be as kind as possible. I sighed a breath of relief when I finished talking. I looked up to see her staring at the floor. I couldn't see the expression on her face at all. Not wanting to make her cry, I turned to leave with an "I'm really sorry." But as I got up, she suddenly reared her head upwards and with a massive shriek shouted, "How dare you!" Her face had contorted into a devilish sneer. It wasn't sadness in her eyes at all. It was fury. She looked at me as though she was looking at a cockroach, her contempt for me as clear as day. Before I had a chance to even open my mouth, she grabbed hold of my shirt and threw me to the ground with an almost otherworldly strength. She then ran off into the kitchen, shrieking all the way. Terrified and lost for words, I bolted out of the door, leaving my shoes behind, all the while hearing her shout things like, "You don't deserve to live, you disgusting degenerate. I'm going to cut your fucking throat." And the ever-reliable, "If I can't have you, no one can." I realized that the situation was dire. She had entered the kitchen to fetch herself a weapon. She most likely just wanted to threaten me, but of course I couldn't be sure. Biting my lips in the hallway, I waited for the elevator doors to open. But as they were about to, with a soft groan, I saw Haruka burst out from her room just 10 meters away. Her door opened with such speed and force, it was almost as if she had broken right through the damn thing without opening it. The intensity in her eyes. She was like a woman possessed. As soon as I saw that, I knew that she didn't simply want to threaten me with the knife in her hand. She really did want to slit my throat. Crying out in shock, I left the elevator and stumbled for the stairs to my left. Her apartment was on the 5th floor, but I had no choice. She would have killed me if I waited there for the elevator to open. I know that much for certain. I ran down the stairs as fast as I could, but somehow her voice behind me seemed to be getting louder and louder. Screams of, "I'll kill you," mixed in with unintelligible shouting. I got to the ground floor and was about to bolt for my car when I stopped. I looked behind me and back at my car. In a split-second decision, I instead hid behind the shadow of the stairs and waited for her. A decision that to this day I believe saved my life. Instinctively, I realized that by the time I got to my car, opened the door and turned on the ignition, I would have been pounced on. She had been catching up with me, and I could tell by the volume of her screams that she was only 1 floor away. So, terrified, I waited. I heard the screams and thumping of feet getting louder and louder. I bided my time and wished with all my heart that this plan would work. I then jolted my leg forward in front of the stairs. I felt my leg connect with her shin with a painful crack. With a yell of surprise, she tripped, or more accurately, flew into the air in front of her. She crashed face first into the ground with a resounding thud, which seemed to echo around the foyer. My God, I didn't think she'd fall into the trap that well. She must have really lost her mind. So much so that she wasn't paying much attention to her surroundings. I quickly shuffled to the safety of my car and peered at her cautiously. She was still on the ground. Maybe I should call an ambulance, I thought to myself. I could see her moving, however, and I distinctly saw other doors opening as the neighbours peered out to see what the commotion was. No doubt that if she told them what happened, they'd now take her side. Honestly, I didn't want to have anything to do with her at that stage. I just wanted her out of my life as soon as possible. I know it was a dick move, but I left her there. I drove to the entrance and floored it. I moved apartments after that. I told all of my colleagues at work not to give my new address away to anyone, and explained the full details of what had happened. I didn't notify the police though. I was afraid she might sue me for what I had done, or even press criminal charges of her own. No doubt I'd come away looking like the bad guy, but you have to believe me when I say I know she would have killed me in that building if given the chance. Anyway, all's well that ends well, right? Wrong. A few days ago, I got a letter in the mail. There was nothing written on the envelope, and there was no stamp. It was clear that someone had posted the letter by hand. I opened the letter to find a single, folded piece of A4 paper. On it was only one sentence. I will always be waiting for you. At the bottom was a kiss mark in red lipstick. And there it is. She's found me. What do you think I should do? Was that letter a threat? A promise? I know it's her, and I'm scared. When I was about 12, my great-uncle John came from Ukraine to visit us in Canada. He had a lot of stories, but this was the one that stood out. In the late 1960s, John was travelling by train from his village to another to visit family. He had to change trains at one point, and was dropped off at what amounted to a platform in a hut in the middle of nowhere. There was no one else at the station, and other than a dirt road that led off into the surrounding woods, there was nothing there. He waited for some time, but no train came. It was winter, and getting colder and darker, and just about the time he started worrying about having a place to stay and some food to eat, an old woman appeared out of the twilight. She asked if he was waiting for such and such a Number 1. I used to be a corrections officer. At my jail, we had a non-violent criminal in lockdown. He'd been put with a violent one. The bad dude killed the other guy with a colouring pencil, put it straight through his eyeball. I was working the female facility, so I only heard all of the chatter over the radio. Speaking of eyeballs, we also had a guy pull his own one out. The worst thing I dealt with, though, were the stories when I was talking to my girls. There was this one girl that none of the other COs could stand. Let's call her Jess. She was constantly in trouble and getting put into lockdown. I had a very good rapport with her, though, and occasionally she'd open up to me. I came in one day, and Jess was in a cell acting out. It turns out that her aunt, who was in the same facility, had just been sentenced to death. This woman, Margaret Allen, in case anyone's interested in looking this up, had killed a woman by cutting her throat and pouring bleach into it, as well as into her mouth. Then she buried her alive. Anyway, Jess was upset by this, and even I was like, look, that fucking bitch deserves death. You need to behave and not get into any more trouble or lose sleep over this. So she proceeded to tell me why she loved her so much. As a kid, around 6, Jess was in an apartment with a few other little cousins when some guy broke in to kill her parents. They were cooking crack at the time. Her 10-year-old cousin shoos all of the kids into a closet and tells them to keep quiet. Jess's best friend, the same age as her, hears screaming and runs out. She's also shot dead. The oldest kid wasn't able to stop her. Long story short, this aunt who had just been sentenced to death took her and all of the other kids in, kind of raised them on and off, and always made sure they were taken care of. They all lived in the same apartment complex. Those of us who aren't raised in such poverty and violence have no idea how bad kids in this country fucking have it. Number 2. 2 months after my brother and his wife bought a new house, they had to go out of town and needed their cats fed. Their house and my office are both a good drive from my apartment, but only a few minutes from each other. My brother said if I wanted, I could just stay over in the guest room rather than driving among the 3 places. So I got the keys and instructions and planned to stay there for 3 nights: Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. Monday evening was uneventful until around midnight. I was lying on the living room couch watching Conan, with a cat lying on my chest. I started to drift off to sleep. The next thing I knew, I was standing in pitch black darkness. I completely freaked out. I had no idea where I was. I felt around in the dark and felt nothing. Finally, I realized there actually was a faint blue light coming from above. I moved towards it, and then understood where I was. I was in the fucking basement. The light was coming through the basement door at the top of the stairs, which leads into the kitchen. Just enough moonlight apparently made it through from a window elsewhere in the kitchen. I bolted up the stairs, turned on the kitchen light, and closed the basement door. I was terrified until I calmed myself down enough to come to the conclusion you probably already came to. I had sleepwalked all the way down the stairs after opening the basement door, which I know was closed. A couple of things are important to this story. First, the basement. The house was very nice. Actually, more than they should have been able to afford. The only exception was the basement. I'd only seen the basement once when I'd first got the tour. It was totally unfinished, and was the one major thing they wanted to fix up. All they had down there were boxes and the washer-dryer. I had no reason to want to go down there, and had kind of forgotten it even existed. The other point is that sleepwalking is kind of a thing in my family, almost an inside joke. My brother talked in his sleep constantly, and would sleepwalk sometimes. It always scared the hell out of me. The idea of people doing things in their sleep just creeps me out to the core. Still does. My brother knew this and would tease me about it, so it was known in my family that I had this phobia. But as far as I know, I had never, ever sleepwalked until that night. The image kept playing in my mind over and over of me asleep, getting up from the couch, walking to the kitchen, opening up the basement door, and shuffling down the stairs in total darkness. Creepy as all hell. Anyway, I saw the TV was still on in the living room, playing The Wedding Crashers. I watched the rest of the movie, trying to laugh and think of the sleepwalking as a funny story to tell my brother. When I went upstairs to go to sleep in the guest room, I stayed asleep. That was night 1. The next morning, in the light of day, it didn't seem that scary. I texted my brother about it and joked around. All day, I wasn't bothered one bit, but as I'm walking out of my office to my car, I'm overcome by this sense of dread. All of a sudden, the thought of going to sleep in that house, and maybe sleepwalking again, is scaring the hell out of me. So I had a plan. I stop at the hardware store and pick up one of those rubber door stopper wedges. At the house, I jam this into the crack under the basement door and kick it until it's as far as it can go. I test it out, trying to open the door, and it won't budge. Perfect. Later, I go upstairs and fall asleep. When I wake up, I swear to God I think I'm dreaming. I was standing in darkness again, but this time I know exactly where I am. The smell is the same. The concrete floor under my feet is the same. I look around for the light from upstairs, and it takes me longer to find it because it's farther away. Last night I was only a couple of feet from the stairs. This night it was maybe 10 feet. I run up and turn on the kitchen lights. I see the rubber wedge on the floor, a couple of feet away, as if it was tossed there. Again, I can't stop picturing myself sleepwalking. Out of the bedroom, down the stairs, trying to open the basement door, bending down and yanking out the wedge, and then, again, slowly down into the darkness. I decided I was turning on the basement lights, and they were staying on. I opened the door and flipped the switch to the basement stairway. I saw there was a main switch at the bottom of the stairs. To give you a quick sense of the layout, the staircase splits the basement into 2 parts. To the right is a small area with the washer-dryer, and to the left is the big open area. I walked down and turned on the lights for the whole basement. That's when I noticed something I hadn't when my brother gave me the tour. About 10 to 15 feet away, in the big area, there was a door to what looked like a small closet. This door was closed, but had no doorknob, just an empty hole, so it looked like it would freely swing open. I realized it was very close to where I had just awoken. Then a fucking freaky thought came to me. It was as if each night I was heading to the door and getting a little farther each time before I woke up. As soon as that thought popped into my head, I booked it up the stairs again, left the lights on, and closed the door. I went up to the bedroom, but it took me forever to fall asleep. That was night 2. The next morning, Wednesday morning, I woke up late for work. I didn't think about the basement at all because I was scrambling to get ready. At work though, I was still curious about what was behind the door, so I texted my brother and asked. He replied, "Wait, why were you in the basement?" I realized that when I texted him the day before, I never actually told him where I woke up, so I tell him I woke up in the basement, actually twice in a row. After a while, he sends this novel-length text. It was about how the basement is creepy, and not to go down there, etc. How they tried putting the litter boxes in the basement, and the cats made a mess in the house because they refused to go down there. How he volunteers to do every chore other than the laundry, just so he doesn't have to go down there. He says all this stuff, and it's surprising to me, because my brother never believed in the paranormal or superstitions, not even when we were kids. I also realize he never answered my question about the door, but I let it go. After work, I get the same feeling of dread as I'm walking to my car. I really don't want to stay there again, and I decide, fuck it, I don't have to. So I go and feed the cats, get my stuff, and drive back to my place. I'm supposed to feed the cats one more time, so I'll stop over in the morning. As I went to sleep at my apartment, I was thinking of all the steps I'd have to take to sleepwalk to the basement again. Find my car parked around the block, drive asleep to my brother's house, etc. But this time, I sleep through the night. That was night 3. Thursday morning, I stop at the house as planned. I'm about to leave when I remember that the basement lights are still on. I don't even hesitate to go down there and turn them off. There was something about being there in the morning that, at the time, made it seem fine. When I go down, again, that door without a doorknob catches my eye, and it doesn't even seem scary anymore. So, what the hell, let's see. I walk over to it, and I distinctly remember not feeling spooked at all. That is, until I reach my hand towards the doorknob hole to pull it open. As soon as I do that, and I mean instantly. I feel this electric feeling, like the air before a storm, and I imagine a hand coming through the hole and grabbing mine. It was like 0 to 60, going from no fear to being certain something horrible would happen if I opened the door. It's hard to describe it other than that electric feeling. I booked it up the stairs and out of the house. So, a month later, I meet my brother for happy hour. A few drinks in, we start joking about me sleepwalking and the creepy basement. I say he never answered me about what was behind the door, and he says I don't want to know. Joking at first, but then, as I persist, he gets more serious, insisting that I really don't want to know. Finally, he tells me, and I don't believe him. He's my big brother, and he's only bullshitted me 1,000,000 times in the past. This was his explanation. The previous and first owners of the house had a teen daughter that used the basement as her bedroom. The door was to her closet, where one night she curled up, took some pills, and killed herself. The family was going to remodel the basement, but after tearing it apart, realized they couldn't do it and had to move. That was why only the basement was unfinished, and why my brother was able to afford the place. The seller had to disclose a suicide happened in the residence. He said if I didn't believe him, to look up the market values of the identical houses in his tract. I know how much they paid for their house, and it was way lower. He and his wife considered themselves rational people, and figured it was a bargain, but they still didn't want to tell anyone. After they moved in, his wife was fine with the basement, but he grew to hate it. He apologized for not saying anything to me before I stayed there, but he never thought I'd have any reason to go down there. Now, here's what convinced me. I said, okay, the only thing that makes me kind of believe you is that last morning I was there, and I went over to the closet door. At this point, I see my brother's face change. I continued. When I went over to it, the air felt like, and at that same instant, I say, electricity, and my brother says, electric, at the same exact time. I saw his face and knew he was telling the truth. I've never stepped foot again in that basement, and I haven't sleepwalked since. Number 3. I was at a party at my friend Brian's house. I was really uncomfortable because I didn't really know anyone there, and I knew that all of Brian's friends were really into drugs. I wound up just watching movies and drinking mixed drinks until I fell asleep in a chair. The next morning, I was getting a glass of water and getting ready to leave, when one of Brian's friends approached me. He asked me if Brian and I had hooked up during the night because he had heard so much noise coming from his bedroom. I said no, and he continued to tease me about it. He was being creepy and insulting, so I left. Later that morning, I found out that Brian had overdosed and died during the night. His friend had heard Brian moaning and thrashing around and thought that he was having sex. Number 4. So about 3 years ago during summer, I had a habit of staying up late playing games with my window open. This usually wasn't a problem since my neighborhood was quiet. However, one night, someone knocked on my window around midnight. When I went over to investigate, I heard someone calling out for help in Spanish. My family was up, and I assumed it was one of our neighbors, so I went outside. Once I saw the person, I immediately knew something was off. Firstly, this wasn't one of my neighbors, and secondly, the person's clothes were ripped, and they didn't have shoes on. Turns out, the person was a she. I thought it was a young boy at first, and she only spoke Spanish. I tried communicating with my basic Spanish skills to no avail. Eventually, I went inside to ask my parents for help. We ended up calling my uncle, who was fluent in Spanish. He helped translate, and told us that she said she was being human trafficked from Honduras, and that she needed help. She wanted either $500 or a car to LA. We couldn't give either, and offered to call the police, but she seemed adamant that the police didn't get involved. After this bombshell, my family went inside and decided to just call the police anyway. After making this decision, we wanted to check up on her at least. But as my mum and I were walking outside, we saw a car with no headlights pull onto our street. We immediately noped back inside. Once we felt like the coast was clear, we went back out, and the lady was gone. We called the cops and filed a report, but we never heard anything more. To this day, I don't know if this was some sort of scam, or if the girl really didn't know that the cops would help her, and that she didn't know where else to turn. Number 5. I had a neighbor who was a corrections officer at a juvenile prison in my city. There was a new kid at the prison one day, He was apparently very shy and very quiet. He had the misfortune of sharing a cell with one of the most violent inmates. His second night there, his cellmate unscrewed a screw from a bench and sat on his bed in the middle of the night. When he woke up, he said, "I'm gonna make you a pirate," and shoved the screw into the new kid's eye. My neighbor was the first corrections officer to respond to the kid's calls for help. When asked why he shoved the screw into the kid's eye, he claimed that he looked at him in the wrong way. That's a pretty fucked up situation if you ask me, and not one I'd like to deal with under any circumstances. Number 6. When my brother and I were around 4 or 5, we lived in a house that was about 100 years old. One day, we were walking up the stairs when we saw a tall man in a black coat and a top hat walk into the living room, which was to the left of the bottom of the stairs. A little freaked out, we thought our dad was pranking us, so called out for him. Shit. Both parents came out from the kitchen, on the opposite side of the stairs and isolated from the living room. I hadn't thought about it for a long time, and we never spoke about it. Then, about a month ago, my daughter asked if I believed in ghosts, so I told her this story. Literally seconds later, my phone bleeps. It was my brother saying, "I was just talking to my partner about paranormal shit. Do you remember the guy in the top hat?" Number 7. My friend was visiting family in the States. They lived in a rural community in Maine, and one morning she woke up before everyone else and decided to go for a run. After around 30 minutes, she turned back and started noticing a van following a few blocks behind her. She thought it was strange, so she started turning down a few streets, with the van following every move. She started sprinting, and the van sped up too. She ran to the first house she could find and started banging on the door. No answer. She hopped the fence and started banging on the back door. The dog in the house started barking at her, but still no one answered. She jumped into the empty pool in the backyard and hid while dialing 911. She could hear that the van had parked in front of the house, and a man started calling out to her, offering her a ride home. The dog in the house was now barking like crazy, and the man left after about a minute. Police showed up and took her back to her family's place. She gave a report, and they identified the van from a nearby HVAC business. It had been stolen earlier that day, and the same man was arrested in the next county at a gas station. Number 8. This happened to my father. I'll tell the story the way he told me. I was 22 years old. I had just gotten a place closer to my new job, but the neighborhood I lived in was secluded. Maybe 4 houses within a mile. Nothing for miles after that. I was having a normal night, maybe my first week there. I watched some TV and fell asleep. When I woke up around 1 AM, I was about to go to my bedroom when I remembered to turn off the bathroom light at the opposite end of the house. As I was walking through the living room, I could barely see through to the kitchen, and even farther, the dining room. It was pitch black because the bathroom door was closed. In the dining room, however, I saw something tall standing up in the corner. I froze, and as my eyes adjusted, I saw it was an old man or woman in a white gown with white hair. "Hey!" I yelled. The old person sprinted towards me like a fucking jet. I sprinted back to my room where the light was on. I put my hands up, ready to fight, and the old person came lunging in, and when they saw me, they stopped and said, "Why are you in my house?" I pretended I was leaving, and apologized while I eased into the closer bathroom, locking the door behind me and calling 911 with the house phone. Turns out, a woman about half a mile away in the neighborhood had a form of dementia and wandered into my house while I was sleeping. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Firstly, I want to say a big thank you for everyone who's helped me reach 1 million subscribers. 1 million? Half a million. Fuck. Getting ahead of myself. Maybe one day we'll get that far, we'll see. But either way, that's crazy. I never thought I'd make it this far. Number 1. Please note that I'm a female, and not a native English speaker. This is the second time where being multilingual has somehow saved my bacon. I recently drove from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to Buffalo, New York with my cat. The ride was long, but we were making decent time for the most part. She and I had gotten up toward right before you get into New York. It was around 5:30 PM, but that also meant it was pitch blackout. We had only stopped once to get some McDonald's, and I drank their iced tea quickly to try and stay awake. I definitely had to pee. I didn't want to leave my cat in my car, so I put her leash on and walked into a gas station. The store wasn't empty. There were some dudes around, browsing for honey buns, tasty cake, and cheaper cigarettes than in New York. There was a woman talking to counter guy up front. She was probably like a regular, based on their seeming familiarity with each other. "Do you mind if I use the restroom here?" I said to the guy working there. The man behind the counter said sure, and my cat and I entered the bathroom. She sat on the counter while I did my thing. My cat jumped about a foot when we heard the doorknob rattle. I laughed and said, "Sorry, occupied right now." Now, my cat is a trained animal. She's trained to be around people, stimulating situations, crowds, and relatively loud noises. She absolutely hates cars, though. I looked over at her after the jump, and her tail was as full as could be, and she got low and climbed up to her favorite position on my shoulders. She dug into my hair with her nails, and did a little grumble at me, the same thing she does when she wants to be let outside. The doorknob rattled again, and she swiped in the direction of the door, like a strike. "It's still occupied," I called out, but I wasn't laughing this time. I then heard someone speak. It was a man's voice, and honestly, it kinda made my blood run cold. They were speaking a cousin of my native language. Should I grab her when she comes out? In my native tongue, grab doesn't have multiple connotations like in English. Let me grab them before they go, grab a bite to eat, grabbed by the hair, etc. No, they used what was similar to take. Another voice replied, "No, the cashier's right there. We can go stand outside. I think her car's the blue one." My cat did her angry grumble sound, and I tried to pet her to reassure her. There weren't any windows in this bathroom, and my car was parked unwisely around the side of the lot. I parked it a little away from the lights, because I had a lot of stuff in it and I didn't want the items to be lit. It wasn't the blue car though, so that was one thing in my favor. I heard their steps retreat, and my cat and I sat there for what felt like forever. We both jumped when we heard a knock on the door. "Come out quickly, and my girlfriend will lead you through the back to your car. They're standing out by the pumps." It was the counter guy, and who I thought was a regular. I opened the door, and she ushered me to the back. Not smart, but I didn't know what else to do. She opened the door, and I could see my car about 20 feet away. I wanted to sprint, but I remembered that I'd used my key fob to set the alarm. I unlocked the car with my keys, and the alarm went off. I still have deep cuts from my cat's panic. I threw myself into the driver's seat and locked the doors. I felt my heart in my throat as I threw the car into reverse and got the fuck out of there. On my way out, I noticed the guy standing by the blue car on the other side of the lot, trying to nonchalantly smoke. They didn't even know I got out. For anyone interested, here's a picture of my cat, a good judge of character. Number 2. I work at my local county animal shelter. Done it for a few years. While you do see a lot of fucked up shit that would probably send you into a fit of rage, you also get to channel that rage into helping lots of awesome critters. It's pretty much what I was meant for. The block is set up like one winding stretch of county buildings. Basically, there's everything on this block from doctors to the homeless shelter. Needless to say, this block has some interesting characters. No biggie. I live in a pretty shit area, so crazy stuff happens all the time. Last year, right in front of me, someone jumped out of their car and stabbed another person in traffic. Didn't even make the news. Took the cops almost 30 minutes to get there. Back on track. My job lets me bring my dog to work, which is awesome. He just hangs out with me, or gets put into a doggy playgroup with his friends, depending on my day's activity levels. He's super nice to everyone, but can be a little intimidating to some people at first. It's understandable. He's a 95-pound Doberman, and they get a bit of a bad rap. So a few days ago, I was up in the front office on my own, since my coworker was on a break. 2 guys come in. Right off the bat, I'm like, damn, these dudes are high as a kite. Well, whatever. Happens. We're located next to a large college. It's to be expected. Anyway, one of the dudes starts asking about volunteering because he has some community service hours due for some law breaking he did, and I point him in the direction of the coordinator who deals with that. He goes, and the other guy stays and starts making idle conversation. What's my name, my birthday, favorite color? He also compliments my tattoos and asks if I got them all for my birthday. I don't know. This town's weird, so I don't question too much anymore. Then, out of nowhere, he starts telling me how hot I am and asks for my last name. I had to give my first because it's engraved on my shirt, but I lied about my last name. I should have just told him I wasn't comfortable with giving my last name out, but of course I have too nice syndrome, and honestly didn't want to be harassed further by saying no, which I have in the past. So the other guy comes back. They leave, and I take my break. Lo and behold, not 10 minutes into my break, I get a text from my coworker that the other guys came back looking for me, and not to come back into work. They apparently leave 20 minutes later. Phew, in the clear. So fast forward. Day's pretty much done, just closing up shop. A different coworker to the one I work up front with comes over and sees that I'm hurrying to leave. He asks me if I want him to take my dog out to a yard we have, let him do his business. I appreciate it and agree. My coworker also says he'll put my dog in my car too, since it's parked next to his and he doesn't mind. He has the night shift to watch the animals, so he's got some time to chill. He's also my homie and knows my routine. I say sure, since I have a few binders to take out anyway, and I hand him my keys. He goes off with my dog and brings my keys back about 15 minutes later. Besides that guy, I'm the last to leave for the night. It's about 8 and already dark here, and the parking lot we have is so small that employees have to find street parking. That's a whole other level of shit. As I'm about halfway to my car, probably a 5-minute walk away, I can hear some low talking and footsteps coming behind me. It doesn't ring any alarm bells at first. Lots of buildings and stuff on this street, and some homeless people mill about later at night, but they're pretty harmless, so I just keep on trucking. Not that many steps later, I hear the steps behind me speed up, and feel a hand touch my shoulder. The hand stopped me so abruptly, I end up dropping my binders with loose papers I just organized. I turn and freeze when I see it's the two guys from earlier. "Did you need something?" I ask, as a sinking feeling set in. "I just wanted to know why you lied to my brother here about your name. You like one of those stuck-up bitches who thinks they're too good?" asked the guy who wanted to volunteer. I stood there with my mouth like a fucking flytrap, no idea how he knew I lied. The other guy answered that for me. He told me he found me on Facebook from searching my work. I came up with the smoothest lie I could, and said that I'm not allowed to give my full name to customers for county law safety regulations. That's total bullshit, but they looked like they believed it. While I'm saying all of this, I see his hand resting on his pocket, and I subtly take in that they both have decent-sized pocket knives halfway concealed. I carry one myself for work, in case an animal ever gets caught on a leash or something, but I'm a 21-year-old girl. I'm 5'2" and 100 pounds. I'm not gonna be able to do shit to these guys if it comes to it. I know that much. So now, I'm wanting to fucking cry, while the volunteer guy's going on about how it's good I'm not stuck up, because they don't like stuck-up bitches, and think they should all be taught a lesson in mannerisms. I'm trying to think how to get the fuck out. No one's around, and I don't want to use my phone to call 911 in front of them. I'm almost to my car, so I don't want to risk going back to work. The guy who's got the hots for me is staring at me like a damn Christmas ham, so I want to puke. Then, they tell me about this party they're going to, and that I should come since I'm a good girl, and good girls go to parties with them. The way volunteer guy said it made it like an order and not a request, and the hairs on the back of my neck went up. I get an idea while he's talking, and just pray to the Almighty it's going to fucking work. I force a relaxed smile and agree, saying I just have to put my binders in my car or my boss will kill me. They look stoked at my agreement, and proceeded to follow me to my car. It's too dark to see inside the windows, and streetlights are a rare thing on this side of town. I get to the back door of my car, open it, and I smile when I see my dog's head pop up from the trunk out of his slumber. Before I even make a sound, his ears go back and he starts growling. I hear a "what the fuck is that?" come from behind me, and that's all it took for my dog to get his ass up and lunge at them, doing his best to get his large body between me and the door. I grab his collar and let him jump out of the car. Let me tell you, he's going nuts. He's got drool flying out of his mouth, and he's snapping and barking and growling something scary. The guys back up, start telling me that we can't bring a dog to the party, and to put the fucking deranged mutt back in the car. I hold back from rolling my eyes and apologize, saying I'm just gonna give him some dog food that I keep in my glove box. I shut the back door and open the front. My dog won't get in, just keeps growling and snapping at the two guys. So I keep a hold of his collar, and I get in the driver's side first, then call him in. Thankfully, he reluctantly follows. I shut it as soon as his ass is on the passenger seat, hit the locked doors button, and turn on my car. As soon as I do that, they know I'm not about to go to some party with their dumbasses, and start to bang on my window. My dog goes into rage mode, and hops in the back, and starts going ballistic, while I peel the fuck out of there, really not caring if I hit one of them or not. Once I'm down the street a bit, I see them in my rearview mirror, just staring at my car. I took the opposite direction in which I normally go home, just to make myself feel better, even though I have an hour commute home. As soon as I get back, I deactivate my Facebook. I told my boss the next day over the phone, and they're working on transferring me to one of our other 2 shelters in the county. So, if those 2 creepy drug guys are listening, I just want you to know that my dog goes everywhere with me, and I'm sure he'd love a second chance at you. For anyone interested in pictures of him, he's the one on the right of this picture. The other is a buddy of his. His name is Zeus, aka Zeus the Moose or Zeusy Moosey. Number 3. So this happened in early July, and it still creeps me out a bit today. I'm a soldier, and I live in the barracks on base, since I'm not married, and can't really afford my own place. For security reasons, I won't name the base or its location. It's typically pretty quiet around here, aside from the common parties that happen on the weekends, so this event was pretty surprising to me. Additionally, I work the night shift 4 days a week from 2 to midnight, so it's even quieter on most days when I return to my room. This night, however, was on 4th of July weekend. Military gets a 4-day weekend on federal holidays, so the common area was a bit louder on Thursday night, my last workday for the week. To give you a better idea about the layout, the barracks are separated into 4 3-story buildings that all share a large, concrete common area. Since we obviously can't smoke in our rooms, the common areas have 2 smoking zones on either side. We call them the smoke pits. The pits each consist of a picnic table, a grill, and a large trash bin, covered by an awning to block out the rain. The pits are the site of most of the parties that occur on the weekends, mainly the one furthest from my building. I'd gotten out of work early, so it was about 10 when I got back to the barracks and made my way to my room. As per usual on nights that don't have workdays following them, there was a party at the pit furthest from my building where most of the people outside were at. However, there was one person at my building's pit. Originally, I assumed he was just out there for a smoke and wasn't up for partying. What was strange, however, was that he didn't have a cigarette. He had no vape and wasn't on his phone. He just sat there, dressed in blue jeans and a red hoodie with his hood up. It was the middle of July in the south, so this was a bit strange. But the rooms are pretty much perpetually cold during the summer. We don't control the AC, and the barracks NCOs just blast that shit on high. It's at like 65 degrees for the entire summer for whatever reason, so I figure he might just have stepped out to warm up. He sat on the table with his arms in his front pocket and his head hanging. Wanting to smoke, I stood at the opposite side of the table and lit a cigarette. The guy didn't speak or even move for the entire time I was there. He just sat there, blankly staring into his lap. I didn't think much of it and just made my way back to my room. I changed and patrolled YouTube for a while. It's important to note a few things here. Each room houses 2 soldiers, and the doors automatically lock when closed. The only people with the key are the unit headquarters, and of course the room's residents themselves. In the event that a resident loses their key, they have to call to get someone to unlock it every time they need to get into their room. That is, until the key is replaced. Additionally, my room is located on the 2nd floor of the building, and is a bit tucked away around the back. So, unlike the rest of the building, there's next to no traffic outside of my room. My side of the room also has the only window, and is right where the door is, so I can hear when someone rarely passes my room. My roommate worked an odd shift from 8 PM to 4 AM, and I wasn't too sure what days he worked. Finally, the room is very dark, and I can't see if my roommate is asleep in the room when I enter. So I close the door quietly by keeping the knob turned as it closes. He wasn't home at this time. At around 2 AM, I hunkered down to get some sleep. Before I dozed off, however, I could hear a shuffling outside. I peeked out of the window and could see some obviously inebriated girl tripping over herself to get to her room. I knew the girl lived in the room next to mine, so I didn't see a need to help her since she was literally right there. But I listened for a while until I heard her enter her room. About 10 minutes later, I heard someone walking towards my door, and then stop. I figured it was my roommate getting home, but I couldn't hear the obvious sound of someone unlocking the door. For a long moment, it was silent. Then, I heard the sound of my door slowly opening. Instantly, I sat up and looked at the foot of my bed where the door was. There was no sound of the doorknob turning, and no click of the lock. The door was just slowly being pushed open, as if someone was trying to enter very quietly, which wasn't like my roommate. Once the door was fully open, someone, not in uniform, walked in. At first, I didn't recognize who it was, until I noticed the red hoodie. I gasped and screamed, "Get the fuck out!" The man jumped and darted out of the room. I jumped out of bed and ran to the door, but by the time I made it, the guy had jumped over the rail and onto the bushes below, and was running across the common area. Immediately, I called the MPs, and they arrived within minutes. A few of them did a search of the area, while the rest made trips around the rooms to check on everyone. The girls' room next to mine was also not closed. They eventually found the guy in a storage room of one of the other barracks buildings. It was a few weeks before I found out the whole story. Apparently, the guy wasn't even a soldier, but was an ex of the girl who lived next to me. Prior to that night, the ex didn't know what room she lived in, and had attempted to follow her to her room after she was finished partying. He knew she didn't have a roommate at the time, so he figured he'd be able to prey on her without anyone noticing. I don't know how the guy got onto base, since there's always an ID check at the gate, and the guy didn't have identification on him. Fortunately for the girl, in my attempt to be quiet, I'd accidentally not closed my door completely, and the guy mistook my room for hers. What's worse is that the girl hadn't closed her door all the way either, so had the guy not mixed up the rooms, he'd have broken into hers while she was extremely drunk and likely unconscious. While I'm fortunate that the girl was safe, I fear for what might have happened if I'd been asleep when that creep was in my room. Typically, the barracks are supposed to be a safe place for troops to sleep, and things of this nature don't usually happen. But this goes to show that you need to be careful, no matter where you are. Number 4. This happened just last night, and honestly, I'm a little shaken up over it. I'll try to retell the tale exactly as it happened, but my fear is sure to have fudged my memory a bit. I work evenings as a dispatcher in a medium-sized Midwestern city. I was driving home at 2 AM when I stopped for gas. In retrospect, it was stupid to have stopped at all. The gas station was poorly lit and completely empty of other customers, but I knew the shady areas of town, and this wasn't usually one of them. As I was pumping gas, I noticed a middle-aged black woman sitting on the curb across the parking lot. It was a cold night, and it just started raining. The woman wasn't wearing weather-appropriate clothing, so she was drenched. When the woman saw that I was watching her, she called out to me from across the lot. My second of many stupid decisions that night was choosing to engage with her. I was worried for her, so I approached her to see what kind of help I could offer. "Hi, beautiful. I'm just trying to get home, but no one will help me," she said. "I'm trying to get to City A, but the cab ride is $60 and I only have 40. Can you help me?" I don't usually give money to panhandlers, but this woman seemed genuine. The weather was terrible, and my job centers around helping people, so I agreed. I had told her I didn't have any cash on me, but if she would come with me inside, I'd take some money out of the ATM and give her a few bucks. Inside, the ATM wasn't working. I apologized and told her there was nothing else I could do for her. She followed me back outside, idly chatting with me as I opened my driver's side door to get in. And then she got in the car. I was too shocked to really say anything. I sat, staring at her as she buckled herself into my passenger seat. As soon as she got into my car, her demeanor changed entirely. She no longer seemed forlorn as much as she did extremely excited, restless. "Just take me to my aunt's house," she said. "She can give me money." Of course, alarm bells start going off in my head. Although my first instinct is to tell her to get the fuck out of my car, my gut tells me that that would be dangerous. She'd already proved to be unpredictable. She seemed to be high, and I didn't know if she had a weapon on her. Forcing her out of my vehicle, I thought, had the potential to elicit a violent reaction. "Where are you asking me to take you?" I finally said. "Just start driving, and I'll tell you where to turn." "No. If you want me to consider driving you somewhere, I need you to tell me where we're going." I say this with no real intention of driving her anywhere. "Don't worry, honey. I'm not one of those bad blacks. I'm not gonna rob you or nothing. Just drive." "No," I repeated. "What's your aunt's address?" "Okay, it's on Street A." "What's the house number?" As I was asking her questions, she got really agitated. We still hadn't left the gas station parking lot. I considered getting out of my car and going into the gas station for help, but A, she seemed to know and be friendly with one of the attendants inside, and B, I wasn't about to leave her alone in my car. Finally, she snapped at me and said, "Why are you asking so many questions? I thought we were friends. You don't trust me? Is it because I'm black?" "I work at a police department," I said. "It's my job to ask these sort of questions." She flipped the fuck out. Started yelling at me about being a snitch, about trying to get her into trouble, just in general losing her damn mind. At this point, I'm more scared than ever. I just wanted her gone, but my instinct still told me asking her to get out of the car wouldn't work. So, I decided to take a risk. I'm not a police officer. I just work at a police department. Why don't I drive you to Walmart and see if they have an ATM there that works? My idea was to get her out of my car as peacefully as possible and then lose her in the store. She liked my idea and immediately calmed down. I knew that driving off with this woman in my car was incredibly risky, but it seemed like my best option at the time. As we're driving, she keeps talking to me. Her thoughts were erratic, bouncing all over the place. It sometimes seemed difficult for her to follow through with one thought, but this is roughly how our conversation went. "I'm glad we're friends now. I have about 5 or 6 people trying to get me. I'm going to come over to your work tomorrow so we can go and arrest them together." "Okay, we can talk about that tomorrow. Tonight you said you're trying to get home." "Yeah, honey. I'm trying to get to City B." "City B? I thought you said you wanted to go to City A." Yeah, City A, that's what I meant. That's why the cab ride is $40. It's far away." "The cab ride is $40? You said you have $40. "I do, baby. I have $40, but the cab ride is $60. Silence. "Are you sure you can't take me to my aunt's house? She lives close by on Street B." "I thought you said she lived on Street A." "No, baby, I meant Street B. But it don't matter, cause she won't give me money anyway. You sure you can't just take me to City A?" It was terrifyingly obvious that this woman was utterly full of shit, because the details of her story were constantly changing. When we pulled into the Walmart parking lot, she finally got out of my car, but only after I got out first. She then followed me into the store. I told her before we went to find the ATM that I needed to use the restroom. My plan was to call the police from inside the store, but she followed me into the bathroom too. And that's when things got really weird. She grabbed me by the crook of my arm and whispered in my ear, "If you don't got no money, that's okay. But let me ask you something, sweetie. Do you like getting your pussy ate?" I told her no as forcefully as I could manage, bolted into a stall, and locked the door as fast as I possibly could manage. As soon as I had a barrier between us, I said, "You know, I have some friends at the police department that can probably help you better than I can. I'm just gonna give them a call and we can figure this out together." Again, at the mention of the cops, she started screaming at me. I just kept reiterating that the police would help her. She snapped at me that she was going to leave and stormed out of the bathroom. But it wasn't over. I waited to make sure she was really gone. Sure enough, not 60 seconds after she left, she came back into the bathroom and started banging on the stall door. Then she said something that scared me more than anything else. "Hey, come back to your car with me. I left my beer in your car." I blatantly tell her that no, I saw her get into my car and that she had absolutely nothing with her, only the clothes on her back. After that, she left the bathroom again and didn't come back. I waited a good 5 minutes before exiting the bathroom. I immediately found a manager who called the police for me. Thankfully, I was in a different police jurisdiction from the one I work in, because I would have been mortified at how entirely stupid I had been the whole night, and would have died of embarrassment if any of my co-workers responded. The officer that did respond took my statement and advised me to be more careful in the future. He said that sometimes panhandlers turn violent, and that just recently, there had been a report of a woman who matched her description, who assaulted a good Samaritan that had stopped to try and help her. I definitely learned a lesson on stranger danger, and I'm lucky to have come out unscathed. I'm glad my stupidity didn't kill me. So guys, the next time you try and help a stranger late at night, don't. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Sorry that I haven't been posting much lately. I actually have an interview coming up which I've been preparing for, so I've been trying to focus on that, as much as possible at least. Once that's over, I'll try get more content out as quickly as possible. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to do some naughty things with that like button. Until the next video guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark. Number 1. This took place back in 1999. I used to work in a store that developed photographs. People would drop off their disposable cameras, and I'd develop the pictures in the back room. Every so often, I'd come across some crazy stuff. Like, there'd be a normal sequence of photographs detailing a trip that a family had been on together, sort of telling a story really. And then, smack bang in the middle, there'd be a picture of the parents having sex, or the husband taking pictures of himself in the wife's clothing. One of the funnier things that popped up was a POV shot of a guy's dick in a banana peel, making it look like he was peeling the thing. As boring as the actual process of photo development is, you really never know what's gonna come out. Thankfully, at that point, I'd never come across anything that warranted police intervention, like messed up shots of kids. A real possibility in that line of work. Anyway, it was a Thursday night like any other. My girlfriend, Claire, and I both had work in the morning, so we took it easy. Ordered some takeout, watched a movie, and fell asleep pretty early. By the time I woke up, she had already left for work, but had left me a little goodbye message written in lipstick on the mirror, something she occasionally did. "See you later. You look so peaceful when you're sleeping." Cute. I didn't have to be at the store first thing, so I took the morning slow. I made some breakfast and sent Claire a text saying how I was looking forward to seeing her later. I get to the store at 10 AM. Someone had dropped off a disposable camera at 9 AM when my boss, the store owner, had just opened up. Apparently, he was in some sort of hurry, quickly left his details and got out of the store. Said it was important that the photos be ready as soon as possible. Well, that was my cue to get to work on them in the back. Once they'd developed, I looked through them, and this is what I found. Pictures of nature, of trees, hills, etc. Several pictures of various spots around town. A photo of a dead and mutilated dog. A shot of a man standing in front of a mirror. He was wearing an animal mask and was holding what looked like a machete. A picture of me walking down the street, taken without my knowledge. A picture of my girlfriend at her workplace, also completely oblivious. More photos of the two of us individually. A few of us together at a coffee place, the photographer's thumb covering up my face in each one. A picture of our house. A dark picture taken from inside our living room. Another from halfway up our stairs. One of our bedroom door. A picture of me and my girlfriend asleep in our bed. I shouted for my boss and co-workers, and called my girlfriend and the cops immediately, making sure that she was around other people, and saying that I'd be with her soon. Claire and I both refused to go back into that house until the cops had searched every nook and cranny. There'd been no signs of a break-in. The cops said you never know who the previous homeowners may have given a key to. We changed the locks, but still couldn't stay in that house any longer. We moved in with Claire's parents for a while, and not long after that, we moved. The thought of someone following us, entering our house and watching us sleep had us both paranoid for a long, long time. Nothing more ever came of it, and to my knowledge, the guy was never found. The information he'd left had been fake, and my boss could only give a loose description of the guy. Like most small stores back then, we didn't have CCTV either. Claire told me she hadn't written that message in lipstick on the mirror. She hadn't noticed it when she'd left for work that morning. Number 2. This was a quick incident a few years ago, but I still think about it every day. I was 21 at the time, often mistaken for 17 or 18. My husband and I were driving home after I picked him up from work around 6 o'clock. The sky was just getting dark. He was quite tired from work, and the drive home was about half an hour, so he leaned his seat back all the way and napped. I stopped over for gas and quietly got out of the car, being careful not to wake him. Right as I started to shut the door, a hand grabbed it, and a voice demanded I got back in the car. Of course, I screamed, and my husband quickly woke up and jumped out of the car. I turned to see an older man, dressed in very baggy, old-looking clothing, with meth sores all over his face. He backed up quickly with his hands in the air. I wasn't gonna do nothing. I wasn't doing nothing to her, he said to my husband, as he knelt to the ground as if to show how harmless he was. I was shaking and told my husband to get back in the car. The man took that as his opportunity to bolt out of the gas station lot and into the woods behind it. We sat for a minute, then went inside and called the police with the cashier. The guy obviously thought I was alone because my husband's seat was so low he was out of sight. I find a little comfort in the fact that if he had kidnapped me, we'd have only gotten about 15 miles because our gas was so low. I hope he just planned on robbing me, but I'll never know. Number 3. Post 1 from 2 years ago. Apologies in advance if this isn't the right place for this, but I just need to get this off my chest. I'm also in the break room at my job on my cell phone, so forgive me if this sounds rushed. For those of you who don't know, I'm a fairly young female. In fact, I'm the youngest assistant manager at the grocery store I work at. I'm also rather petite. In our store, there's a small kiosk that sells cell phones and various services related to that. There are several different guys who rotate through this kiosk. One in particular, Bob, has weirded me out from the get-go. As soon as training was over, I started running the front of the store alone. That was when the comments started. Every time I walked by the kiosk, Bob would say something like, "Hey gorgeous, when are you gonna ditch your boyfriend and come and date me? I can take you for a ride in my truck if you know what I mean." He also stared at me whenever he got a chance. It didn't matter if I was in customer service, the pharmacy, at the register, wherever. If I was in the front, he was staring at me. Since about December, it's gotten physical as well. He's tried holding my hand, purposely brushing by me as he walked by, and playing with my hair as I counted registers down at the end of the night. Within the last couple of weeks, he's also snuck up behind me and grabbed my waist a couple of different times, and gotten close enough that I could feel his breath on the back of my neck. He's also started showing up frequently when I work. I'd say that about 80% of my shifts, he's been there, staring, skulking. Despite me telling him multiple times to leave me alone, he hasn't got the message. And now, he's back. I had my back to the doors, and all of a sudden, I felt hands on my waist and lips on my neck. I freaked out and told another supervisor to cover the front, and I'm currently hiding in my break room, trying not to cry. Post 2, made on the 28th of January. So about 2 years ago, I posted here about a man named Bob, a guy who had been harassing me at work. He'd follow me, try to touch my hair, waist, anything he could get away with. Shortly after I posted, I was offered a promotion at the same chain, but a store across town. I gladly accepted, hoping that I could lose this creep and get on with my life. For a while, everything was good. I made my new bosses aware of the situation as a precaution. Still, they chose to continue having someone walk with me to and from my car, especially when working the night shift. Then, about a year after I started, the calls began. My customer service clerks would answer, transfer the calls to me, and when I picked up, the caller would hang up as soon as I finished my introduction. Annoying, but whatever. Lots of kids play dumb pranks like that. The calls progressed. It started with him not saying anything, then changed to, "Hey baby, do you miss me yet?" I'd just hang up. Then the calls changed. They got more menacing. "Hey sugar lips, I like your new car. Did you think you could get rid of me that easily? That's a cute top you're wearing. Bet it'd be really easy to rip off of you. I know you think you're invincible, running to your bosses. They can't stop me when you're alone." Soon after that, I saw his very distinct truck in the parking lot across the street. There's no way it wasn't him. My bosses insisted that it was just a coincidence, that we couldn't do anything since he wasn't on our property. It didn't matter though. Every time I walked to or from my car, the truck would be across the street. I knew it was Bob, but he had gotten smarter. Our cameras didn't reach far enough to see him. If you looked at the person in the driver's seat, you couldn't make out many features behind the hat, glasses and phone. I could always feel his stare piercing through the windshield. Pictures started showing up in the store's mail. At first, it was of me standing by my car, sitting with someone outside at break, or me walking to or from the store. We still couldn't officially blame Bob, though I'm sure he was the one doing it. It escalated to pictures of me counting tills, standing in the store, or talking with customers, all of them shots where he'd have to be 20 to 30 feet away, but we'd never find him on the security cameras. I became paranoid and couldn't get any work done for fear of him watching me. My bosses were wonderful and moved me to the back room, where I was away from all of the customers. One final shot came though. A picture of me in the back of the store, operating our forklift, with "Miss you, sugar lips," written across the back. Last August, I was accepted and started classes at my dream school 2 hours away from my home. I quit my beloved job and moved, hoping that this would finally give me some freedom. A week ago, I started seeing what I think is Bob's truck, just rolling through campus. Today, I found a note on my car with a picture of me talking to my boyfriend. The note said, "Miss me, sugar lips? Don't worry, even he can't protect you." Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Well, my interview's all done, so yay. I can finally get back to focusing on making these videos for you guys. Keep an eye out for another one coming sometime this week. I'm thinking about making it a volume 3 of those disturbing Reddit post videos, but I'll see what I can find, see what I come up with. We'll see. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to do some naughty things with that like button. And until the next one, guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark. Number 1. At around 3 AM one night, I was running around my neighborhood with my middle school friends. We were fucking around outside when we heard a cop car come flying up with its lights on. We dove into some woods to hide, and the cop car slowed down, put on its searchlight, and scanned the woods. We stood stone still, the 4 of us, until the cop car passed. Then, all of a sudden, one of my friends sprints between us, deeper into the woods. What the fuck? We start whispering to each other, trying to figure out who had just run off. We walk out of the woods, and realize that we're all there. Someone else had been hiding in those woods with us. Number 2. I lived in Menifee, California, for about over 3 years. During that time, I went to the local high school, and let me just say that a lot of crazy stuff went down while I attended. One time, a library employee showed up to school very early in the morning and shot herself in her car. The body was discovered during second period. What creeps me out most of all was that I passed by her car while I was walking to school that morning and didn't even notice it. Another time, an undercover cop posing as a student was able to identify kids that were selling narcotics, and shortly after, a huge drug bust ensued. Strangely enough, on the same day that happened, while I was walking to school, some guy I knew asked if I wanted to buy pot off him, which I wisely declined. Later on, I saw that same guy get arrested and escorted out of my classroom. If you've ever seen 21 Jump Street, the event itself closely mirrored that. Pretty awesome. However, the one event that was probably the biggest and shook the entire community was the disappearance and death of a local boy named Terry Dwayne Smith Jr. The tragedy happened during the summer after the 2013 school year. I didn't know who the boy was, but I did know his older brother, Skylar. I knew Skylar from school. He was in my first period English class at the time. I didn't talk to him much, even though he sat near me, but on the times that I did say a word to him, he was friendly. He came off as a little bit odd, but I personally didn't think he was really that strange. He had his own group of friends who were really easy to get along with. Something of note that did happen early on in the school year was a confrontation he got in. I remember hearing about how this one guy said something offensive to Skylar, which in turn greatly angered him, and it all erupted into a fight. The kid's front tooth got knocked out. At the time, it seemed funny to everyone else, but it was an indicator of how far Skylar was willing to go when it came to getting agitated. Anyways, on to the main story. After school ended that year, I spent most of the summer just hanging out with my trio of friends. One day, I was in my room doing nothing of interest, so I decided to go on Facebook. While on there, Skylar posted something that appeared on my newsfeed. He said his little brother had gone missing and was urging his friends to be on the lookout for his whereabouts. I found it pretty unfortunate, but thought the kid would probably be found the same day. Either that day or the next, I forget which, I happened to be watching the news, and the #1 topic was the disappearance of a boy named Terry. A picture of him was then put up. On closer examination, I noticed he was the same boy that Skylar had posted about earlier. Apparently, the situation had gotten dire, and the brother's mother, Shauna, had called for a group effort to go and search for the boy. As the days went on, more and more people went out in search of young Terry. I believe Skylar made a few more posts about it, but I could be wrong. Eventually, he was made a suspect and was taken into custody by the police because he was the last person to see Terry alive before he went missing. I remember hearing about how a lot of his friends were in denial and disbelief. To them, he could never do such a thing. Since I personally didn't know Skylar that well, I couldn't really pass judgment at the time. While in custody, Skylar changed his story several times about his last encounter with his brother, his main one being that they were both home alone, and he decided to leave and go and hang out with his friends, and that supposedly Terry had followed him for a while, until Skylar told him he couldn't tag along and ordered him to return home. This set up his theory that Terry was probably abducted by someone that night. Finally, after several days of searching, Terry's body was eventually discovered behind the family home, under a tree in a shallow grave. The general consensus at the time was that Skylar did kill his brother for unknown reasons, and tried to bury him. Some even thought that the mother was in on it, because she was still in defense of Skylar, who was then charged with the crime. Shauna acted pretty strangely, saying that Terry had autism, and that supposedly at first she didn't let the cops investigate her property. After the corpse was discovered, the huge search party was promptly called off, and a candlelight vigil was held for Terry. In the aftermath, a lot of drama ensued. Terry's father came into town from the other side of the country and claimed that his ex-wife had lied about their son having autism, and demanded to take his body back with him to be buried in his local area. He even sued Shauna for a large amount of money. I think it was for child negligence or for emotional distress. The two even appeared and debated on the Dr. Phil show, but nothing came out of that besides what everyone already knew. Since at the time Skylar was a minor, he wasn't charged as an adult. He was found guilty of manslaughter, but was offered a plea deal, the details of which have not been released to the public. Apparently, what actually happened was that the brothers were roughhousing when Terry was accidentally killed. Their mother later suggested something like the boy hitting his head on the corner of a table. In a panic, Skylar tried to bury him in the backyard. What was strange was that knowing what had happened, Skylar still went to Facebook and asked for help in searching for his brother instead of just confessing. Skylar was sentenced to 12 years and will still be in juvenile detention until he's 23. Overall, this was pretty tragic, and it's crazy how one day I was just talking to this guy in class, and the next he's on the news for his own brother's murder. Links to the case can be found in the description below. Number 3. I was driving home late one night, somewhere between 1 and 3 AM. The road I was driving goes through the back end of a couple of counties in the deep south. Nothing around but forests, fields, and the occasional group of shacks huddling under a light, only barely keeping the night away. I'd driven this stretch of road many times before, even at this time of night, so it wasn't really a big deal. Just a long trip is all. Since there was rarely any traffic that time of night, I was able to turn the stereo up and push the pedal down. And then I came to this bridge. Nothing really noteworthy about it. It's not ancient, or a covered bridge, or all that spooky at all. Just a concrete span over swampland, trees growing right up near the edge and turning the road into a dim trail at the bottom of a dark canyon. I'd been over this bridge many times before, and like I said, aside from being fairly long, it wasn't really noteworthy. That is, until that night. It was humid out, and as the temperature dropped, there was a little bit of fog. Not enough to really slow me down, but I had to turn on the high beams. So I'm shooting across the bridge, and it hits me that it seems to be taking longer than normal to cross. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. When I thought I was finally getting to the end of it, I saw a figure walking on the opposite side of the road. At first, no big deal, right? Guy walking in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. Probably lives nearby. Probably drunk. I keep an eye on them to make sure they don't fall in front of the car, but my mind is already racing. I mean, this is the middle of nowhere. There are no houses around. There are no lights but the stars and my headlights stabbing out into the darkness. And as I whiz by, going way too fast for my own good, I notice two things. First, the figure is wearing what appears to be a straitjacket, the sleeves undone, and the straps trailing the ground. Glaring white against the background of the night, there was no mistaking it. A straitjacket, hands covered, straps dangling and waving as he walked. Second, it has no face. Not like there's no head there. There's a head shape and the place where a face should be. But no face. Just an expanse of darkness that I took to be his skin. I chalked it up to going really fast. Contrast between the white jacket and the dark skin at night. And just plain creepy thoughts. I mean, surely I couldn't have just seen that. I tried to spot him in the rearview mirror, but it was so dark there was nothing to be seen. I slowed down a little, and was suddenly off the end of the bridge, and on normal two-lane blacktop again. I briefly considered turning around, seeing what it was. Surely it was just a trick of the light, or my mind playing tricks on me, right? But I still remember my heart pounding, and the fear I felt as I sped on through the darkness, driving home. Number 4. I worked for a large rental property company. A man called one of our properties and asked if they had any units available on a high floor. This was a high-rise in a great location, where the upper floors had a nice view of the city, so the request wasn't unusual. The man came to view the unit, and a leasing agent took him on the tour. She opened up the balcony to show him the view, and then she went back into the unit, expecting him to follow. When he didn't, she turned around, and he was gone. He had jumped from the balcony onto the road below. The unit was on something like the 20th floor. Number 5. When I was around 14 or 15, a few of my friends and I decided to go and mess around in an abandoned hospital in our town. We always did this kind of thing. There were a bunch of abandoned warehouses that we would frequent to do the usual, namely smash and break things, take pictures, etc. It was just a pretty arbitrary decision to go to the hospital. There was nothing in particular that made us want to go there, and no one could have known we were going there. So, as we all climbed through the small window at the back, we stood in a small room that led out into the main hallway, with the old reception desk and stairs. Normally, people would start exploring out of curiosity before we all made it inside, but this time, everyone was in the same room. Where there was usually an open doorway, a big piece of wood was blocking the door with no handle. It confused us slightly, because we were certain it wasn't there before. After a few seconds of pushing and trying to knock it over, a voice booms from behind the door. "Get out." The voice sounded like it came from the earth itself, and had such a horrible sound to it, my bones practically broke themselves trying to escape my skin. Literally, I've never seen good friends push each other out of the way for their own safety before, but we all manically scrambled out of the small window, not caring who we pushed aside. Looking back, it seems pretty obvious it was some homeless person, but that's easily the most creeped out I've ever been. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. So a relatively short video, I suppose, but either way I hope you enjoyed it. And coming up next will be the Q&A video that I promised a little while back now. Again, a very special thanks to Anthony Salinas for the thumbnail for this video. He's a major talent, so make sure to check him out down below in the description. Not much more to add this time, other than smash that like button or I'll smash you. And I'll be back again with some more scary stories very soon. Until then guys, stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark. Number 1. I've been a long-time stalker of this page, and I have a story of my own that still haunts me to this day. Let me set the scene for you. I was 7 years old, currently 25, and my mother was dating a man who had a daughter who was around 15. Her name was Christy. While she didn't live with us, she did stay with us some weekends. The reason this is important will come into play a little later. I grew up in a moderately isolated area in the south. My mother's house is on about 90 acres, most of it being heavily wooded. For the most part, it was quiet, the type of place most people don't even lock their doors, and everyone knows each other. It was quiet, until one sequence of events shook my community to its core. There was a man, just 2 streets over from mine, who murdered his girlfriend and her entire family in their home over a dinner, just 2 weeks before this event took place. It was also learned later that he had also murdered his mother and father in their home, as they were found after his girlfriend's family was. He hadn't been caught, and the local police had been working with cops in Tennessee, as there had been reports of people sighting him there. My mother had gotten a security system installed, just to ensure our home was properly secured. We had alarms on every window and door in our house. On this Saturday, my mother got called into work, as she was an apartment manager, and there was an emergency she needed to tend to. Her boyfriend had gone to work early that morning. Now, my mother was very, very nervous about leaving. And due to the nature of the emergency, she thought it was best that Christy and I stayed at home where we were safe. Safe, so she thought. She reluctantly left, and let us know that her cell phone was always going to be on if we needed her. Christy and I promptly set the alarms and made sure all of the windows and doors were locked. My mother had been gone about an hour, and we were deep into a movie on Disney, eating pizza. Suddenly, the alarm started blaring. Christy and I jumped up to see what was going on. On the way to the alarm, you have to pass a very large, sliding glass door. What we saw there left us frozen. There was a man prying our door open with a crowbar. He saw us, made eye contact, and quickly ran off into the woods behind my mother's house. I'll never forget what he looked like, or the sinister look he had in his eyes. We called the police, and then we called my mother, who had already been alerted by the alarm company. My mother actually arrived before the police did, due to how isolated we really were. When we described the man to the police, they immediately knew this was the man they were looking for. Of course, there was a massive investigation that day of the property and the woods that surrounded us. In the woods, they found cigarette butts, lots of canned food, soda bottles, and a makeshift tent made from a tarp. The man had been living behind us the entire time, and even stealing food from our trash. When he was arrested, which was a few hours after the incident, he had admitted to watching our family to learn our habits, knowing that he could take advantage of the house when no one was there. Even now, as an adult, this event still follows me. Just goes to show, you never really know who's watching you. Number 2. I personally don't know who did this, but my grandma does. Back in the 70s, they had a family party. This guy put rat poison in a Coke bottle, back when they had those releasable metal caps. Then he left it in the fridge with the rest of the Cokes for whichever unlucky family member would drink it. My uncle was maybe 7 at the time, and he snuck it. The kids weren't allowed soda, so maybe whoever poisoned the cola didn't think a kid would end up with it. It ended up killing my uncle. My grandma lied about it, and I was always told some kid at school did it. My dad or his sister could have just as easily been the victims themselves, but they were too scared to drink the cola, fearing they'd get in trouble if their parents caught them. For years, I was convinced they might have been connected with the mob, since my family is Italian. That's just a hunch though. I think it was more of an arsehole way of playing Russian roulette with Coke. Nothing ever came of it, and despite the fact it was her own son who died, my grandma never revealed the killer. Why that might be, I don't know. I'm assuming more than one person knows, but since she didn't do anything about it, no one said or did anything. Number 3. I've had a lifetime of weird experiences, so I could bang on all day about them. But for now, we'll go for the one which was probably naught more than a strange coincidence. But still, it freaks me out. Driving to work a few years ago back on a hot summer morning, the skies were clear and blue, and the sun was already beating down. I guess it must have been around 7:30 AM. I was listening to a local radio station, with not a single fuck to give about anything. I was chilled out, and happy to be alive. As I pull out from a junction and join the queue of traffic slowly crawling towards the town centre, I spot a very odd-looking woman, just across the road from me. Now, I don't have the best memory for details, but I do very clearly recall that she was about middle-aged, had very unkempt, shoulder-length hair, like really scraggly, and I could tell from both her facial expressions and her gait that she wasn't all there mentally. She was hobbling along in an awkward and erratic manner, apparently staring down at the pavement, with this weird expression on her face. It's hard to explain. Anyway, just as I'm being a judgmental piece of shit and thinking, well, fucking hell, she looks mental, this woman snaps her head up from glaring at the floor and perfectly meets my gaze. Her eyes lock onto mine, and this fucking awful, twisted grin appears across her face. At that very same moment she locks her eyes onto me, the radio goes batshit crazy. Think somewhere between a distorted signal and static. After a couple of seconds, she looks away and carries on about her business. As she averts her gaze, the radio returns to normal, and my blood turns to ice. I haven't seen her since, and no offense to her, but fuck all of whatever that was in its entirety. Number 4. This happened back when I was 21 and living in downtown with my boyfriend. I had just found out that my boyfriend, who I'd been with for almost 4 years, had been cheating on me. We were invited to a Halloween party that night, and had initially declined the invite. But then I found out about the cheating, and told him I was going. He could stay home if he wanted. We were in the process of breaking up and dividing our assets. Anyway, the breakup is relevant to my frame of mind. We lived in a rather sketchy area of downtown. One of those brand new apartments built in a slummy area sort of things. I'm in my car, and any other night, I'm the type of person who keeps the windows up and all of the doors locked until out of the area immediately surrounding our apartment. However, my mind was understandably elsewhere, and I had both driver and passenger windows down so I could smoke a cigarette. The first red light I came to on my way to the party was still in the shady part of town. I'm the first car at the light, so I have full view of a 20-something guy